So I planned out the topic for this video more or less. I don't script these intensely. That comes later. But I planned out some things I wanted to say and stuff I wanted to talk about, and then I forgot to record. So we're once again looking at nighttime kudzu trying to eat my house. It's not a kudzu. It's just a normal. Ow! Ow! That was a cat landing on me in a bad way. Ow! Maybe you could hear the. That was my leg. Anyway, nope, not a kudzu. Just some vine. Ow! Some vine. Trying to eat my house. God, that hurts. Oh, that hurts. Um. Anyway, before I start bleeding, um, I wanted to talk about a what you might consider a variant on item intrigues, intrigue maps, but there's more to it. Location intrigues, uh, location intrigue maps. Why do I keep forgetting that word? Location intrigue maps, location relations. In many ways, location like a house or even uh, a part of a building, an apartment, or a certain part of an office block, or some part of a military compound or an entire military compound, whatever. Um, a location, yeah, that's maybe the kitten you can hear going nuts in the background. It's playing very harshly. Um, yes, you are a monster. Where did you go? I don't like filming my house, sorry. Um, in part because it's dirty as hell. Because the cats make everything messy. Anyway, back to the topic, and not my house full of destroyed cardboard boxes and murdered cat toys. Locations differ from items in a few very essential ways. The two main ways are one, that you spend your time as much inside, or you can spend your time as much inside them as you can spend it outside them. So it becomes an environment. An item rarely becomes an environment. It does dominate everything around you. If you hold a sword, no matter how cool your sword is, and how important it is to what you're doing, it's not your entire environment. If you are in a factory, however, that factory is your entire environment, and things may come out at you from any place, but they will be things that are most likely connected to the factory, not just random things. Things can come out at you from every corner when you're holding a sword, too, sure, but there's no specific system to what comes at you just because you're holding a sword. If you're in a factory, there's likely some system to it. That is the culprit. Domino! And now I'm trying to clean this place. Don't take the garbage out of the bag. I'm trying to clean this. You are insufferable. And there's Nico again. Oh my god, my knee hurts. He dug his claws right into it and jumped on. But yeah, and that's just some fruit I ate. Sorry, it's really messy. I'm kind of I forgot to record this, and I'm still kind of confused um, about why. But anyway, you are inside a location, which means that first of all, you're not. likely to be inside more than one location. If you have a sword in one hand, you can have a shield in the other, or for that matter, you can have a walkie talkie in the other hand. A location tends to be exclusive. He's just. I was just worried he wanted to jump up on me again. A location tends to be exclusive once you're inside of it. So it very much dominates. That's Nico. It very much dominates the situation in a way that an item does not. It precludes other relations to other locations from interfering, you might say. But another thing about a location is that it is situated somewhere. That's part of the fact that a location is more or less stationary. You can consider some mobile things, places, such as being on an aircraft carrier or in a very large spaceship. But on I don't know if you can call it personal basis, but on an immediate basis, the the location is stationary. You don't get to take the factory along with you unless you're playing in a very unusual world. Um, but that also means that it is stationary along with other locations near it. So a location will probably be influenced in some way by what's around it. If nothing else, it might be influenced in the way that it's trying to not be influenced, like a military compound that is surrounded by a fence or even a wall because it doesn't want anyone from the surroundings peeking in on it. But if you are in an office near a busy street, you will likely be able to hear noise and the kind of uh, sounds that comes from a street. If you are in the middle of a desert, you're likely to have sand blowing in around the location, at least on the outside, if not also on the inside. And in dire situations, the surrounding locations may be used. Stop trying to steal garbage. I'm trying to clean this place up, you nut job. Yeah, they do that all the time. I love them, but they do that all the time. Um, One thing that comes to mind is the movie Mission Impossible 3, where the main character, played by Tom Cruise, actually gets into a building by leaping and swinging from an adjacent building into it. And things like those are. The hell has gotten into you? Did you do coke while I wasn't watching, Domino? You're insane. Um, Another example is from the old Judge Dredd movie, not the new Dredd movie, but the old Judge Dredd movie, and probably the comics. I haven't read them. Where in a sci-fi city of giant buildings, there's a thing like block war, where people from one building fire at the adjacent building. But much simpler things can be used for similar effects. If you are in, let's say, a harbor and you're looking for some ships that you've got a clue about, you should be looking for someone in a adjacent location, such as a tall building or just any nearby building that is at least tall enough, like a two-story bar or something like that, could be surveilling you, could be watching you, monitoring you without your knowledge. That would be less likely if the harbor was in the middle of you nut job in the middle of nowhere, like some rocky island or an industrial area that was mainly open spaces. The hell is going into you, man? So these relations to adjacent things can be very, very intense and very, very important. And they are often ignored because the idea is that once you're at a location, you're just at that location. No, that location has various relationships to locations around it. But it also has the other relations that I've been talking about. I'm just watching him nervously. That I've been talking about. Like there are people who own it. There are also likely people who belong there. That's something that's not as usual with items. But people may be living there. People may work there. There are people who are expected to be there. There are also people who are expected to be the ones who have certain items, sure, or even to be part of certain factions, like the faction of a big kitten going completely crazy. Um, but it's more taken for granted that people may belong in a location or may not belong in a location. So there could be a group of people who are expected to be seen at a location while another group of people is expected not to be seen at a location. And that would stand out if they were, like having a child walk around a factory. Something is clearly wrong there. Or for that matter, having a group of children, even if that group of children has an adult leading them, unless they have a very good reason to be at a factory. That's that's gonna be there's gonna be something weird there. Um, but relation maps for locations can be a bit more tricky to make because of the adjacent factor. Everything is adjacent to something, and it might be going overboard to have every location be mapped out in its relations to everything around it. So that's probably one of the cases where you focus on what really matters. But the relations to other things, the people or the items for that matter, the items or people that are expected to be there or the factions that are expected to have a presence there, those can be very interesting. And especially if you're trying to. That's why you're chasing him. He's chasing one of the others. I think it was Gecko. Um, where was I? This is going to be a very messy video. I'm sorry, but they're not going to stop right away. Yeah, where was I? If you're trying to figure something out that is related to intrigue, like figuring out who committed a crime in a certain location, not only could you be interested in that location, but in what the relationship is to nearby locations if people cross over. If, for example, you have, let's say, a murder at a shopping mall, it would be nice to know if people were crossing over from the nearby office building. If they're not, then it's less likely that someone from there did something, and it would be more interesting if you actually spotted signs that someone did come from there because that's unusual. You also have all the uh, olden goldies. That's not golden oldies. That's what it's called. Dear God, um, of people being able to have feelings for a place. Nostalgia comes to mind, but also someone might really love walking around in a place that could be an art gallery or it could be an old building that has been abandoned and neglected that they just like walking around in. That says something about people where they like to go. And it's also interesting to notice if people are likely to meet. It, that wasn't Domino, that was the other one. I think it's Gecko. If people are likely to meet in a certain location, do people have access to it? It's very unlikely that, let's say, a journalist and a receptionist who knows something about a company's crimes that they would meet at a military compound. It's also unlikely that they would meet in a place that is under heavy surveillance, like, for example, an art gallery. They're probably more likely to meet in a place with less surveillance, but do they have access to that? Is there a place with the right amount of surveillance that they can both get to without being spotted or standing out? And in that way, again, like items, a lo- hello, a location is more a part of the intrigue map or intrigue maps, plural, of the world than just a single storyline, unless it's a very uniquely designed place, a location designed specifically for a purpose in that story, which is perfectly possible. But most locations are likely exist because of the world they exist in, not because of a brief role in some events unfolding. So it's more probable that a location is part of a world intrigue map. It can be a part of the item intrigue map, but again, making an intrigue map specifically for locations of interest can be a good idea because if items are moved around too much, their relations with a location may become strained. Sure, certain items may belong in a certain place, but if they're taken away for a long time, that bond may be broken, they may be replaced or something like that. So there are enough reasons for locations to have their own intrigue maps, but it's not as essential as keeping, for example, persons and items on different kinds of intrigue maps. Essential is a bad word. It's not as practical. You don't have to separate them at all if you don't want to, but it's sometimes a good idea, especially if you're aiming for continued stories where the world will become more and more apparent, more and more described, because then you get into more and more world related intrigue maps like locations and items. And personal intrigue maps may be less important because characters tend to be switched out more between stories. All of this is probably and usually and often and so on because there's nothing written in stone when it comes to this. There are just things that it makes more sense to keep separate. But yeah, In many ways, locations have the same opportunities for storytelling as items, or indeed some aspects of people. Not a lot, but some aspects of people. Ooh, uh, someone just jumped up on me, Nico. Um, but the fact that they are immobile, and the fact that the adjacent or nearby locations are also immobile, and the fact that you are usually surrounded by a location rather than carrying it with you, these all make locations a slightly different experience, and have slightly different opportunities for intrigue than, for example, items. And I think I'll stick to that, and then I will go check if I'm actually bleeding from that kitten attack.